The firm goes to your brother. This is not for a woman, Dad said. I left that day. Build my own legacy. A year later, he begged me to save it all. My name is Alexandra Pierce, and I recently graduated from Harvard Law School as the top of my class at the age of 29. My entire life had been devoted to joining Pierce & Associates, the prominent legal company that my grandpa had founded from scratch. I never anticipated that the day I came into my father's office to take my proper position would end with his frigid gaze informing me, "This is not for a woman." I gulped back tears as he passed the family heritage to my less competent sibling. I went out that day with only my bar test notes. Whether you're viewing this, please leave a telling me where you're from and whether you've ever experienced comment discrimination. Don't forget to subscribe to learn how I got from rejection to managing the entire business. I grew up in Brooklyn, a rich Boston suburb where achievement was expected and failure was just unacceptable. Our family dinner talks focused on major cases, legal precedents, and courtroom strategy. My grandpa, Edward Pierce, was my idol from the time I learned what he did for a career. He transformed Pierce & Associates from a single desk in a shared office space into one of Boston's most prestigious legal firms. Unlike many men of his period, Grandpa Edward was a progressive thinker. "The law is about justice, Alexandra," he would remind me, allowing me to wear his reading glasses and sit in his massive leather chair. "And justice doesn't care whether you're male or female." Some of my earliest recollections are of visiting the firm's offices during the school holidays. While most 9-year-olds were playing with dolls, I was alphabetizing case files and pretending to be an attorney with Grandpa's extra briefcase. I would hold pretend trials for my toy animals, always sure justice was served. The firm's paralegals would draft formal verdicts for me on firm letterhead, which I valued more than any toy. Grandpa Edward and I had a particular relationship that grew deeper as I got older. Dad would preserve newspaper cuttings about female judges and attorneys breaking down barriers and leave them on my bed with small notes saying, "This could be you someday, Alex." When I was 13, Dad took me to see a female prosecutor in court. I sat in awe as she dominated the room with intellect and accuracy. That day reinforced my path. My father, Charles Pierce, was unusual. He joined the company after marrying my mother and worked under my grandfather's guidance. Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle sexist remarks he made at home. "Women are too emotional for criminal law," he'd add casually at breakfast. "That judge lost the case because she was too soft." I rejected these comments, feeling they did not apply to me. After all, I was a Pierce. My brother Daniel was born when I was 4. As we grew older, it became clear that Daniel loved sports and video games, whereas I consumed books about important legal cases and spent summers interning at the company. He was intelligent, but lacked the enthusiasm for law that seemed to run through my veins. Nonetheless, he took the expected road to law school, but with far less excitement and far poorer marks than mine. My mother, Margaret, was the epitome of a conventional wife. She handled our home with exquisite style, hosted dinner parties for customers, and never questioned my father's authority. "Your father knows best," was her refrain anytime I questioned his judgments. She supported my academic achievements while constantly reminding me that family comes first for women. I adored her, but secretly promised myself a new type of life. My scholastic trajectory was a straight line to success. Valedictorian in high school, entrance to Harvard undergrad, and then Harvard Law. I gave up everything for my academics, including turning down dates, missing parties, and spending holidays at the library. During breaks, when my classmates traveled, I got internships at famous businesses to help me improve my resume. I was single-minded in my goal, and knew exactly where I was going. The universe threw me a curveball during my second year of law school. Grandpa Edward suffered a big stroke and died within days. I was heartbroken. At his death, I quietly resolved to make him proud by carrying on his legacy of fair and empathetic legal representation. My father took over the company totally, and during my holiday trips I saw small changes. More corporate customers, less pro bono work, and a colder mood among the employees. Nonetheless, I pushed forth with even more tenacity. I graduated summa cum laude, passed the bar test on my first attempt, and was ready to start at Pierce & Associates. There was no official job offer, it was just assumed. I was a Pierce. I had the qualifications and had been trained for this my entire life. The corner office adjacent to my grandfather's former location was being refurbished, and I had already discussed prospective cases with several of the senior partners I had known since boyhood. Everything I'd ever worked for was now within grasp. I spent the weekend before my formal start date putting together a presentation on how we might broaden the firm's practice areas and attract a more diversified clientele. I purchased an expensive new outfit, had my hair professionally groomed, and performed power postures in my apartment mirror. I had no clue that in less than 24 hours, my entire world would fall on me. Monday, I recall thinking it was a wonderful sign as my morning started bright and clear. Meticulously prepared my makeup and dressed in the navy blue suit I had purchased particularly for this occasion. The suit had cost about $2,500. An investment in my future, I assured myself. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings for luck and grabbed my leather portfolio, which was full with ideas for my new position at the business. The usual weight of family expectations settled easily on my shoulders as I drove to the downtown office building, where our family name was prominently displayed in the directory. I greeted the security officer by name, boarded the elevator to the 14th level, and boldly strolled through Pierce & Associates' glass doors. The receptionist smiled brightly, but there was something in her expression, pity, concern, that I could only see in retrospect. "Your father wants to see you in the conference room," she added, avoiding my gaze. "Daniel is already there." This was my first indication that anything was wrong. Why would my brother be there at my orientation meeting? Daniel had graduated from a mid-tier law school 4 months prior and barely passed the bar on his second attempt. He had exhibited little interest in formal business until recently. I knocked on the conference room door before entering, and my father and brother were sat on one side of the large mahogany table. The mood was stiff and official, nothing like the warm greeting I had expected. My father said, "Alexandra," without rising. "Have a seat." I sat across from them, suddenly feeling like a job candidate rather than a family member. My father shuffled some papers, cleared his throat, and gave me a look I'd never seen before. Impersonal, businesslike, and devoid of fatherly tenderness. "I've made a decision about the future of the firm," he told me. "As you know, your grandfather built this practice with the intention of creating a family legacy. After careful consideration, I've decided that Daniel will be groomed to eventually take over as managing partner." The words did not instantly register. I sat there, portfolio open to my presentation notes, waiting for the remainder of the statement. Surely an explanation of my function would follow. "What about me?" I eventually said, my voice smaller than intended. "You've done well academically," my father said, as if talking about a stranger's accomplishments. "But this firm represents some of the most powerful clients in Massachusetts. They expect a certain tradition, continuity, the Pierce name passing from father to son." "You can't be serious, Dad," I blurted out as I realized what he was saying. "I've worked my entire life for this. I graduated top of my class while Daniel barely passed. This firm was as much Grandpa's dream for me as it was for you." My father's expression darkened. "This is final. The firm goes to your brother. This is not for a woman." The words struck me like a physical blow. Not for women. 4 words that shattered all I had worked for, everything I believed in my family, and everything my grandfather had promoted. "Clients won't take a female attorney seriously in the position," my father added. "Besides, you'll get married eventually, have children. The firm needs stability." "That's ridiculous," I responded, struggling to maintain my voice level. "Some of the best attorneys in Boston are women. I've sacrificed everything for this moment. My qualifications are superior in every way." "Qualifications aren't everything, Alexandra," he dismissively stated. "This is about tradition, family values, the future of what your grandfather built." I looked at Daniel, who was examining the table and refused to meet my gaze. "And you're okay with this?" I inquired. He shrugged uneasily. "Dad knows what's best for the firm." My phone vibrated with a text from my mother. "Trust your father's judgment. Call me later." So she knew. They had all known, possibly for months, that I was planning my future at the business. "This is wrong," I exclaimed, my voice rising in wrath. "Grandpa would never have approved of this. He believed in merit and justice." "Your grandfather isn't here anymore," my father snapped. "I'm managing partner now, and this is my decision." "I've earned my place here," I said, showing them my credentials, honors, and recommendation letters. "I've worked harder than anyone. You can't just dismiss me because I'm a woman." "That's enough, Alexandra," my father remarked, getting up from his chair. "I expected you to behave more professionally. This emotional reaction only proves my point. The decision is made. Daniel will join as junior partner next week. You would do well to accept your limitations and know your place." Something snapped inside me when I heard those words. Know your position. I grabbed my paperwork with trembling hands, shut my portfolio, and stood. "My place," I replied softly, "is not under the thumb of a man who values tradition over talent and gender over justice." Grandpa would be ashamed of what you've done to his legacy. My father's cheeks reddened with rage. You can leave now. When you've calmed down and accepted reality, we can discuss finding you a suitable position elsewhere. I proceeded to the door and then turned back one more time. I won't be calling, and I won't be coming back unless it's on my terms. I strode into the workplace with my head held high, over inquisitive stares and muttered whispers. I only took one thing from the desk that had been set for me. My bar test notes, which had my grandfather's congratulations remark scrawled in the margin. Everything else may stay. Once inside my car in the parking garage, the tears flowed. Hot, angry sobs of betrayal and astonishment. All I had fought for, all I thought I knew about my family and my future, was a lie. I had been stupid to believe that my father would ever accept me as an equal, that my hard work would overcome his prejudice. I gave myself precisely 15 minutes to cry before wiping my eyes and starting the engine. If Pierce & Associates did not want the greatest attorney in the family, it was their loss. I had no clue what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never again allow a guy to determine my value or restrict my possibilities. The following several weeks were a jumble of fury, anguish, and bewilderment. When I informed my friend Rachel Morgan, a fellow Harvard graduate who works at a big business, about what occurred, she gave me her spare sofa. I had canceled my apartment contract, intending to utilize my new salary to locate a nicer place. Now I was basically homeless, sleeping on a pull-out sofa underneath framed legal degrees that matched mine. Rachel remarked, "He'll come around," as we drank cheap wine from coffee cups that first night. "Your father can't possibly think Daniel is better qualified." "It's not about qualifications," I remarked, as the reality of my predicament hit home. "It's about chromosomes." Nothing I could have done would have changed his mind. My parents contacted many times that first week. I forwarded every call to voicemail. My mother left heartfelt texts urging me to be sensible. My father's words were concise and strong, urging that I halt my juvenile conduct. Daniel texted once, "Dad is really mad. Just apologize and come back." As if I had done something wrong by demanding equality. Following a week of emotional processing, the practical realities came home. I owed around 6 figures on my school loans. My funds would only last 4 months at most. The coveted clerkship that I had turned down to join the family company had now been filled. I needed a job. I began submitting applications to every legal firm in Boston, emphasizing my academic accomplishments while carefully avoiding any mention of Pierce & Associates. The replies varied from courteous rejections to unpleasant interviews in which it was evident they recognized who I was. "Why aren't you joining your family's firm?" one interviewer inquired bluntly. "I want to make my own way," I said with a polished smile. "Charles Pierce is an old friend," another partner added. "He mentioned you might be contacting us." That was the moment I discovered my father had blacklisted me. Not directly, but via the old boys network that linked Boston's legal elites. Nobody would say it openly, but employing me would risk alienating a powerful colleague. After 30 rejections, I widened my search to include smaller businesses and legal assistance organizations. I met Linda Park, a great lawyer who had encountered similar challenges 25 years ago. "The legal profession talks about progress," she told me over a cup of coffee. "But walk into any partners meeting and count the women, then count the women of color. The numbers tell the real story." To cover my rising obligations, I took on contract paralegal work, document review, and research help, anything that would provide income while I looked for an attorney position. It was a mind-numbing job much below my capabilities, yet it kept the lights turned on. 4 weeks after the event, as I had come to refer to it, I met Daniel in a coffee shop near the courtroom. I had just concluded a morning of document review and was wearing the same outfit for the 4th time this week. He wore a neat new suit with the firm's lapel badge. "Alexandra," he murmured, seeming embarrassed. "How are you?" "Fantastic," I said with forced cheerfulness. "Living the dream." He had the courtesy to show embarrassment. "Look, I'm sorry about how everything happened. I didn't ask for this." "But you didn't refuse it either," I observed. "You sat there silently while Dad dismissed everything I've worked for. What was I supposed to do?" "You know how Dad is when his mind is made up. Stand up for what's right. Support your sister. Question blatant sexism. Any of those would have been nice." Daniel dropped his voice. "Everyone misses you. Dad thinks you'll come to your senses soon." "Come to my senses?" I asked incredulously. "Is that what he calls accepting discrimination?" "Tell Dad I'll come back when he comes to his senses and realizes it's not 1950 anymore." I moved away before he could react, rage fueling my movements. They all expected me to shatter, to crawl back and take whatever crumbs were handed. They completely misunderstood who I was. As Thanksgiving neared, my mother contacted me every day, demanding that I attend the family feast. "Your father will never apologize if you don't take the first step," she told me. I declined and spent the holiday with Rachel's family, feigning smiles while feeling like an outcast. Christmas was terrible. I sent gifts to my parents' residence but did not pay a visit. I declined invites to the firm's holiday party from supportive former colleagues. Instead, I worked extra paralegal hours while firms were short-staffed, earning time and a half but missing out on family rituals I had enjoyed since childhood. New Year's Eve marked the bottom. Rachel was at a party with her boyfriend, while I waited alone in her apartment, surrounded by job rejection letters and past due notifications from my school loans. For the first time, I questioned whether law was my true calling. Perhaps my father was correct about something. The legal profession was an old boys' club that would never genuinely welcome me. I was thinking about this dismal notion when Rachel arrived early from her party. "Enough wallowing," she said, taking away my glass of wine. "This isn't the Alexandra Pierce I know." "Maybe that Alexandra was naive," I joked. "That Alexandra graduated top of our class and terrified everyone at moot court. That Alexandra doesn't let sexist bullies win, even when they're related to her." Her tough love approach inspired something in me. The next day, January 1st, I attended a legal community networking event at the Boston Bar Association. I wasn't very gregarious, but I sipped a club soda in the corner until I recognized Judge Eleanor Whitman, a retired female judge famed for tearing down boundaries in the 1970s. "Your grandfather was a good man," she replied after I introduced myself. "He stood up for me when few would. I was sorry to hear about your situation." "News travels fast," I lamented. "In legal circles at the speed of light," she explained. "So, what's your plan?" "Still figuring that out, trying to find a firm that will hire me despite my father's influence." She looked at me attentively. "Have you considered another option? Your grandfather started with nothing but determination and principles. Perhaps the apple doesn't fall far from that tree." That talk sowed a seed. I spent the next week researching what it would take to open a small practice. The criteria were intimidating, but not impossible: office space, malpractice insurance, basic furniture, a website, and business cards. Of course I would need customers, but maybe I could start with little cases and create a reputation. With each article I read and budget I created, a new determination rose inside me. My father had closed one door, but perhaps this would drive me to open another, one that would eventually lead me further than the preset road I had planned to take. A week later, I informed Rachel, "You want to know my plan? I'm going to build something better than Pierce & Associates, and someday they'll regret choosing the lesser lawyer." Finding office space for a paralegal income was my first significant difficulty. After looking through dreary windowless apartments in basements and dodgy buildings, I discovered a modest place above Mary Ann Turner's Cafe, in a gentrifying neighborhood in South Boston. The room had previously been rented by an accountant, who left behind a damaged metal desk and a bookcase that leaned alarmingly to the side. The rent was barely beyond my means, and Mary Ann, the mid-60s dynamo who owned the cafe downstairs, knocked off 20% when she heard my story. "Men have been underestimating women since the beginning of time," she explained as she handed me the keys. "Proving them wrong is the sweetest revenge." I emptied my savings account to pay for the security deposit, first month's rent, malpractice insurance, and company registration expenses. I purchased an old computer, a used printer that clogged every fourth page, and the most inexpensive office chair I could find. I splurged on business cards with thick cardboard and raised typography. Alexandra Pierce, attorney at law. Because appearances count in law, even if the truth is held together by duct tape and hope. My website was a template affair, developed over restless evenings after long days of paralegal work. I couldn't afford to leave that job just yet, so I worked evenings and weekends to expand my practice. Sometimes, instead of returning to Rachel's couch late at night, I slept on a yoga mat in my office. Rachel helped me get my first serious customer. Her cousin Heather Collins wanted a divorce lawyer, but couldn't afford the fee most businesses demanded. I agreed to labor for a reduced rate that would be paid in installments. Heather was fleeing an emotionally abusive spouse who had told her she was useless and couldn't exist without him. Her plight struck a chord with me on a profound level that astonished both of us. "He controlled everything," she revealed during our first encounter. "Made all the decisions. Said women aren't good with important things like money or business." "And you believed him?" I inquired. "After hearing something enough times, you start to wonder if it's true." I poured myself into her case wholeheartedly, working considerably more hours than our arrangement allowed for. When we reached a fair settlement that included assistance with her return to school, the smile of relief and optimism on her face was worth more than any salary. Heather recommended a buddy who needed help with a landlord conflict. That client recommended her sister, who wanted a basic will made up. Word of word resulted in a continual stream of tiny instances. Nothing showy or lucrative, but enough to get judicial experience and establish a reputation for thoroughness and compassion. I began to specialize on representing women who faced job discrimination. These customers frequently shared similar tales about being passed over for promotions, working in unfriendly situations, and trying to be taken seriously in male-dominated sectors. Their conflicts felt personal, and I found fulfillment in battling with them. My schedule got grueling. I maintained paralegal work 4 days a week while expanding my practice. My office hours ranged from 5:30 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. most days. For my budding practice, I served as an attorney, paralegal, receptionist, bookkeeper, and janitor. I survived on coffee and takeout from Mary Ann's, which periodically brought up a complimentary slice of pie with the comment, "Lawyers need sugar too." 4 months in, I joined the Women's Legal Alliance, a network of female attorneys who helped each other through referrals and mentorship. At my first meeting, I was the youngest and least established attorney present, yet they greeted me warmly. "We've been watching your progress," remarked Elaine Tran, one of the original members. "It takes courage to do what you're doing." This network helped me get my first large case, representing a lady named Courtney Blake in a sexual harassment lawsuit against a well-known financial services business. The defendant engaged Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the city's most famous companies, whose senior partner happened to be my father's golf pal. The case necessitated significant investigation, witness preparation, and strategic strategy. I worked around the clock and slept even less than during law school exams. The opposing counsel used every technique to frighten me, including schedule issues, excessive document demands, and insulting remarks about my little office. I stayed calm on the surface while directing my rage into rigorous case preparation. During depositions, I watched the other firm's senior partner becoming increasingly concerned as I destroyed their star witness evidence. His companions stopped grinning and began taking detailed notes. By the last day of discovery, they had raised their settlement offer 3 times. When we eventually won, winning a large payout and obligatory training sessions for the corporation, numerous local legal blogs reported the David versus Goliath narrative. My phone started ringing more often. Potential prospects approached me directly rather than discovering me through referrals. 8 months after opening my office above the cafe, I recruited my first employee, Chloe Ramirez, a recent law school graduate who had experienced prejudice and wanted to understand employment law. We converted a storage closet into a second workplace in my little office. With a bit more stable income, I moved into a studio apartment with just enough space for a bed and dresser. It was still a long way from the luxury condo I'd hoped to purchase with my family company income, but it was mine, earned through my own labor. The 18-month anniversary of my practice coincided with the announcement that Pierce & Associates had lost a big customer. I learned via my network that Daniel had botched a critical negotiation by arriving unprepared and unable to answer simple questions. On our anniversary, I treated myself to supper at an upmarket restaurant that I couldn't afford. As I sipped a glass of champagne, I knew I had accomplished more than simply survival. I'd started to construct something important on my own terms. The betrayal still stung, but it had led me to abilities I would not have discovered otherwise. I silently toasted myself in front of locked doors and open windows, as well as guys who underestimate women at their risk. By the 2-year point, I'd built a modest but flourishing practice. I moved into a professional office suite with 4 rooms, which was still small but a huge improvement than the area above Mary Ann's. I hired a part-time receptionist to answer phones and meet customers, allowing Chloe and myself to focus solely on casework. I even added a third team member, Evan Brooks, a smart paralegal who has a talent for uncovering hidden evidence that others have overlooked. My expertise in employment discrimination lawsuits drew a constant stream of customers, and my track record of success began to speak for itself. I won a historic lawsuit against a software business that had consistently underpaid female engineers, resulting in not just back pay for the impacted employees, but also policy improvements throughout the local tech industry. The Boston Legal Journal ran an article describing me as an attorney to watch and emphasizing my swift climb from unknown solo practitioner to renowned advocate. The piece made no mention of my family's link to Pierce & Associates, which was an editorial decision I respected. I wanted to be remembered for what I had accomplished, not what I had lost. As my professional reputation rose, knowledge about the family practice spread through the legal community. Daniel was struggling with the duties my father had imposed on him. He had lost many key motions owing to poor preparation, and was overwhelmed by client expectations. My father, unable to admit his error in hiring Daniel, retaliated by micromanaging every element of his job, producing a poisonous environment that drove away 4 loyal associates. The firm's image was tarnished, with murmurs of diminishing quality and internal strife. I had mixed thoughts about these events. Part of me, a little, wounded part I wasn't proud of, felt justified. But more, I was unhappy for my brother, who had been set up to fail, and for my father, whose pride kept him from admitting his mistake. The issue escalated when Richard Lawson, a long-standing Pierce & Associates customer, contacted me following a chance meeting at the courthouse. "I followed your work on the Blake case," he told me. "Very impressive. I've been with your father's firm for 25 years, but I'm considering making a change. Would you be interested in discussing representation?" The question raised ethical and emotional concerns. Taking clients from my family's company was like crossing a boundary. However, I had every right to expand my practice. After careful analysis and conversation with my mentor at the Women's Legal Alliance, I developed a personal policy. I would not aggressively seek clients through Pierce & Associates, but if they approached me directly, I would consider representation. Over lunch with Linda Park, who had become a close friend and counsel, I learnt more about the situation at my old family business. "The legal community is concerned," she explained cautiously. "Your brother has been observed appearing unprepared in court. There are rumors he's been drinking during lunch breaks." "Daniel was never cut out for this," I lamented. "He wanted to teach history, but our father wouldn't hear of it. Now he's miserable and failing, and Dad's too stubborn to admit he made the wrong choice." "Speaking of family," Linda inquired, "have you had any contact?" "None," I conceded, but not because they didn't try. My mother still calls monthly, but always with the same message, that I should apologize to Dad for my attitude and everything can go back to normal. 2 days after that chat, my mother showed up unexpectedly at my office. She appeared smaller, more delicate than I recalled, and clearly uncomfortable in the humble surroundings. "This is nice," she added, looking around my waiting room. "Very cozy." "It serves our needs," I said, taking her into my private office. "What brings you here, Mom?" She fidgeted with her wedding band, an anxious behavior I remembered from childhood. "Your father doesn't know I'm here. He'd be furious." "That doesn't surprise me." "Things at the firm aren't going well," she said. "Daniel is struggling. Your father won't admit it, but he's worried." "And," I said, anticipating where this was going, "he needs your help, Alexandra. The firm needs you, but he'll never ask." I felt a rush of emotions, anger that she would make such a request, pity for her position stuck between us, and a glimmer of triumph that the truth had finally been revealed. "I can't fix Dad's mistake," I stated gently. "Not unless he acknowledges it was a mistake in the first place. Not unless he's willing to treat me as an equal, not a daughter who should know her place." "He's from a different generation," she begged. "He doesn't know how to admit when he's wrong." "Then he'll have to learn," I stated forcefully. "I've built something here, Mom. Something I'm proud of. I won't abandon it to rescue Dad from his own prejudice." She departed shortly after, clearly upset, but perhaps with a greater understanding of my commitment. I felt a sense of remorse seeing her leave, but I knew I had made the correct decision. The journey to recovery could not begin with me surrendering my value once more. As my practice expanded, I concentrated on developing the business culture I had always envisioned: collaborative, helpful, and merit-based. I started a mentorship program for female law students, providing internships and advice to young women confronting the same challenges I did. When I got the Boston Women's Bar Association Rising Star Award that spring, I dedicated it to my grandpa, who felt that justice should never be based on gender. Several of his former co-workers attended the event, and their approval was more valuable than any family honor. The pinnacle of that era came when we won a class action lawsuit against a corporate behemoth for widespread gender discrimination in promotions. The compensation was significant enough to create national legal headlines and solidify our position as strong champions for workplace equality. The day following the judgment, a box came at my office with no return address. Inside were my grandfather's law books, which included the whole annotated Massachusetts legal code that he had used throughout his career, as well as his own annotations in the margin. There was no letter, but I felt my mother had sent them surreptitiously, as a subtle way of honoring the family's actual legal brilliance. I displayed them prominently on my office bookcase, providing a concrete link to the tradition I was honoring in my own manner. Whatever happened to my family in the future, I knew my grandpa would have been proud of the lawyer and person I'd become. 2 years after leaving Pierce & Associates, my practice was booming. We had relocated to a larger office in a famous downtown building, with 5 full-time staff and an expanding customer base. I'd finally paid off my college loans and moved into a nice apartment with a view of the bay. More significantly, I had established a reputation as a tenacious advocate who refused to back down from a battle. The call arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reading deposition transcripts when my assistant mentioned that my father was on line 1. For a second, I assumed it was a mistake. We hadn't communicated for 2 years. "Alexandra," he murmured as I responded, his voice missing the customary forceful tone. "We need to talk in person." "About what?" I said, maintaining a level tone despite the rush of excitement flowing through me. "The firm is in trouble. Serious trouble. I wouldn't call if there were any other option." Something in his voice, a sensitivity I had never heard before, convinced me to meet. We planned to eat supper at Morton's Steakhouse, a neutral location with adequate solitude for a tough chat. I came 20 minutes early and chose a corner table with a great view of the entryway. My father arrived right on schedule, and I was astounded by his look. He had aged drastically, with deep lines carved around his eyes and lips. His strong stride had morphed into a tired stroll. "Thank you for coming," he murmured, taking his seat without the typical family embrace or cheek kiss. This was business then. After ordering beverages, he went right to the point. "The firm is facing a malpractice lawsuit, a serious one, with potential criminal implications." I kept my expression neutral. "Tell me." "Daniel mishandled a major client's trust account. There were irregularities in how funds were managed. The client is alleging negligence bordering on misconduct." "Was it negligence or misconduct?" I inquired frankly. My father gazed down at his water glass. "Daniel has been struggling with the pressure. With alcohol. He made serious errors in judgment. And now you need someone to clean up the mess." Before he could react, Daniel appeared, looking much worse than my father. Emaciated, with black bags beneath bloodshot eyes. He moved into the chair beside our father and avoided my eyes. "Alexandra," he muttered. "Thanks for coming." "I'm still waiting to hear exactly what happened," I said. Daniel eventually glanced up. "I screwed up. Bad. I was in over my head from day one, trying to handle cases I wasn't prepared for. Clients I didn't understand. I started drinking to cope with the anxiety. Missed deadlines. Cut corners. The Broderick Trust," my father said. "Daniel was handling their estate planning, significant assets that required careful management. There were improper transfers." "Did you steal client funds?" I inquired plainly. "No," Daniel protested. "But I moved money between accounts to cover mistakes, failed to document transactions properly. When the beneficiaries started asking questions, I panicked and tried to cover my tracks." "The optics are terrible," my father remarked. "Even if we can prove there was no criminal intent, the reputational damage could destroy the firm. Your grandfather's legacy would be ruined." I sat back, taking in the information. "And you want my help?" "We need you," my father conceded, the words obviously tough for him. "Your expertise, your reputation." "My reputation?" I repeated. "The same reputation you dismissed as irrelevant 2 years ago when you said a woman couldn't handle the firm's major clients?" My father had the decency to appear embarrassed. I was wrong. 3 simple words I never expected to hear from him, but they weren't enough. "If I were to consider helping," I added slowly, "I would have conditions." "Name them," my father responded quickly. "Equal partnership. My name on the door. Pierce, Pierce, and Pierce. Complete control over handling this case. I bring my key team members with me. And structural changes to the firm going forward. Modern policies, inclusive culture, merit-based advancement." My father began to disagree, then noticed Daniel's frantic expression and his own quivering hands. "We don't have much choice, do we?" "There is always a choice," I responded, "but only one that saves the firm." After dinner, we arranged to meet at Pierce & Associates the next morning to begin the damage assessment. I spent a restless night phoning my colleagues, describing the issue, and formulating our initial approach. Walking back through Pierce & Associates' glass doors felt weird. Some staff were astonished to see me, while others were relieved. My father's longtime secretary embraced me firmly and said, "Thank God you're back." During my leave, the firm had undergone changes. The mood was tense, with vacant desks and quiet talks. My grandfather's photo stood in the foyer, his gentle eyes following me as I proceeded to what would become my office, ironically, the same corner office that should have been mine 2 years before. I stood alone in the empty room, arranging my grandfather's legal books on the vacant shelves, and gave myself one quiet moment of emotion. Not triumph or vindication, just resolution. The cycle is completing itself in unexpected ways. Then I started to work. I transformed the largest conference room into a war room for our crisis team, covering the walls with timeline charts, legal methods, and communication plans. I brought in my best performers from my own business and assigned them particular assignments. I went over every document linked to the Broddick Trust, determining exactly what had gone wrong and how it might be fixed. The damage was significant, but not irreversible. Daniel had made severe mistakes but had not engaged in purposeful deceit. With the appropriate strategy, quick disclosure with clients, a reasonable settlement offer, reorganized management, and strengthened supervision mechanisms, we might possibly address the matter without criminal charges or irreparable harm to the firm's image. For the following 4 weeks, I worked 17-hour shifts and slept on the office couch most evenings. My father watched with admiration and sadness as I led the response team, talked with opposing counsel, and devised a thorough recovery strategy. "You're better at this than I ever was," he confessed one late night as we discussed settlement conditions. "Better than I ever gave you credit for." "I know," I answered simply. The moment to seek his favor was long past. The following 4 months were the most grueling of my working life. Saving the company requires legal acumen, diplomatic skills, and unwavering drive. The malpractice issue was eventually settled for a large fee, but there were no criminal charges or public scandals. I established payment arrangements that would be financially damaging but not ruin the company. More difficult was restoring the company's internal structure and culture. I carried out a comprehensive restructuring, putting individuals in places that suited their talents rather than their gender or connections. Daniel, free of the obligations that had crushed him, sought treatment for alcoholism and finally found a job managing client relations, where his natural social abilities could flourish without the strain of sophisticated legal work. My father observed while I altered the business that he had operated for decades. He rebelled at changes, beginning sentences with, "We've always done it this way." But the crisis humbled him, and he finally acknowledged that adaptation was required for existence. The most significant modification occurred when a new sign was erected over the reception area: Pierce, Pierce & Pierce, Attorneys at Law. My name was given its proper position alongside my father's and grandfather's, recognizing my status as equal partner. 8 months after my return, the firm had steadied. We lost some clients as a result of the controversy, but we maintained others who valued our candor in dealing with the problem. Our updated approach, along with my employment legal experience, attracted new clients. My father invited me to his office one evening, after the most of the workers had gone home. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, our first drink as real comrades. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice raspy with passion. "A real one, not just because I needed your help." I waited, allowing him to continue. "When your grandfather built this firm, he had a vision of justice and integrity that I lost sight of. I became fixated on appearances, tradition, doing things the way they had always been done." He stared at me directly. "I was wrong about you. Wrong about women in law. Wrong about a lot of things." "Why couldn't you see it before?" I said, a question that had been bothering me for months. He breathed deeply. "Fear, probably. Fear of change. Of the unfamiliar. My own father taught me rigid ideas about men's and women's roles. I never questioned them until I was forced to. Grandpa was different," I noted. He encouraged me. "Your grandfather evolved. I didn't," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "It wasn't a full recovery. Too much had transpired for that. But that was a start. We would never have the basic father-daughter connection of my upbringing, but we might create something new. A partnership of equals built on mutual respect." In the months that followed, I launched a formal mentorship program for female attorneys at the company, which I named after my grandpa. I established a scholarship fund for female law students who face financial hurdles, particularly those interested in fighting prejudice. These activities helped to shift the firm's reputation from conventional and exclusive to progressive and diversified. Daniel found his footing in his new role, free of expectations that never fit him. In a private chat he said, "I never wanted to be a courtroom lawyer. I just couldn't tell Dad that you had the courage I lacked." My mother was slower to acclimate to the new family dynamic. After decades of being the supporting wife who never questioned her husband's actions, she struggled to relate to me as a strong woman in her own right. But she eventually found her voice, even clashing with my father at family gatherings. A tiny revolution in its own right. 2 years after rejoining Pierce, Pierce & Pierce, I saw Rachel for supper at the restaurant where we had shared cheap wine following my initial rejection. If someone had told you that night where you'd be now, would you have believed them? She was asking. I thought about the question thoroughly. No, I was so focused on what I'd lost that I couldn't see what I might gain. And what did you gain? She said. Independence. Confidence. The knowledge that I can build something from nothing. I grinned. And the satisfaction of proving my father wrong, in the most spectacular way possible. We clinked glasses to celebrate not just my professional accomplishment, but also the road that had turned me into someone stronger than I could have dreamed. My office door now displays a modest plaque that reads Alexandra Pierce, Managing Partner. Every morning when I see it, I remember the day I walked out with nothing except my bar exam notes, convinced that my professional life had ended before it had even begun. That heartbreaking rejection set me on a road that resulted in greater success than if I had just inherited my job. I've learnt that even the deepest betrayals may lead to our greatest accomplishments. Closed doors might push us to look for windows. That proving yourself on your own terms is more rewarding than meeting someone else's expectations. And, perhaps most crucially, that no one, no matter how strong or influential in your life, has the authority to determine your value or restrict your abilities. If you've ever encountered prejudice or been told you're not good enough because of who you are, I hope my story offers you strength.